Okay, so I have a migraine, but I still have to do my reading because when you're in grad school, you still have to do things that you don't want to do. Yay! So, cognitive psychology, I'm on chapter 5 right now, and I have a test tomorrow that's due tomorrow evening on chapter 5, and it's 30 pages long. So let's get started. Study with me. Yay. 5.1. This is on attention. Everyone knows what attention is. It is the taking possession of by the mind in clear and vivid form of one out of what seems several spontaneously possible objects of trains or chains of thought. Focalization, concentration of consciousness are of its essence. It implies withdrawal from some things in order to deal effectively with others, and is a condition which has a real opposite in the dazed, confused, scatterbrained state. William James, Principles of Psychology, 1890. Okay. 5.1, Introduction and Definition of Attention. Everyone does know what attention is. I don't know why that was emphasized. When someone tells you to pay attention, you usually have no doubt about what is meant. James further described, who's William James? Okay. James further described attention as a process that determines the contents of consciousness. Attention as a process that determines the contents of consciousness. Okay. In other words, the only things that we know in some sense are those of which we are consciously aware, and attention directs our awareness. Since attention follows or actually determines much of what we are doing, learning itself relies on attention, and poor attention can interfere with learning. Yes, and that is why I have to read out loud. Otherwise, I start thinking about what I ate for lunch or what I want to eat instead of lunch, or what my dog is doing, or what else I would rather be doing. Of course, there are many things that we can learn to do expertly that are not conscious or attended to in any specific way. One could think of how we learn to ride a bicycle, or learn to walk, speak, swim, or hit a ball with a bat. Perception and language are only two of the immense human capabilities that are present in some form at birth, but develop prodigiously at the hand of experience. Perception and language are only two of the immense human capabilities that are present in some form of at birth, but develop prodigiously at the hand of experience, with or without our attention to many details of what is being learned and how. As these important skills become so well learned that much of their execution becomes automatic, that is without our needing to attend to them, attention can be freed to deal with, that way you can see her, silly goose, to deal with other tasks such as understanding and responding to what we see and hear. I agree. I am also bored. Attention has been defined in several related ways. Researchers have distinguished between various states of attention, such as vigilance, which is maintaining focus on a single task or information source, such as a screen for an air traffic controller. Maintaining focus, so that's vigilance. Arousal or alertness, which is readiness for any new input. Arousal, alertness, vigilance, selection and avoidance of distraction, orientation, divided or switching attention, and filtering. However, the most commonly researched aspects of attention in psychology are in terms of selection and capacity. The most commonly researched aspects of attention in psychology are in terms of selection and capacity. Selection, capacity. Selection is necessary because the environment is simply too full of information for us to attend to all of it simultaneously and to process it in any meaningful way. Yeah, okay. So, like selective hearing or selective memory. Similarly, we are subject to an enormous number of memories, plans, and worries that can compete for our attention to the environment. Leave it. Stop licking your feet. You just got an allergy shot. Leave it. For example, as you're reading this sentence, you might be trying to attend to its meaning while trying not to be distracted by background noise from conversations or the TV. It is also possible to be distracted by a sudden itch or by noticing that the room is cold, or in this case, hot because it's a heat wave. Some of these interruptions of our attentional focus are important. In special circumstances, good. Our survival can depend on being able to avoid an obstacle in the road or reaching out for a handrail when tripping on the stairs. At other times, such interruptions are annoying, as when our train of thought is broken into by some recurring worry about relationships, school, or finances. In general, attention serves to select some important information for us to process deeply. While the vast majority of sensory inputs and recurrent thoughts are not so selected and have only fleeting effects on our conscious awareness, if we are even aware of them at all. Capacity limitations are related to selection because humans are notoriously incapable of doing two or more demanding things at once. Selection is used to channel the information that we need for accomplishing current tasks into conscious working memory while preventing information overload from irrelevant information. Excuse me. Kahneman capacity. Kahneman in 1973 proposed that such capacity limits place strong constraints on how well we can do two or more things at a time. Wickens refined this idea by defining capacity limits at different levels in the human attentional system. That is a weird word, attentional. He argued that attentional capacity could be viewed as having separate pools of processing resources for perceptual processing. Separate pools of processing resources for perceptual processing. Separate pools for perceptual processing, cognitive decision processing, and verbal versus spatial processing. I believe that. The idea is that resources are consumed more rapidly if two tasks both demand the same type of perceptual and cognitive resources than if one is primarily perceptual and the other is primarily cognitive. Further, with practice, an attention-demanding process can become automatized, that's a word, such that it requires fewer resources to operate than when it was first being learned. Schneider and Shiffrin, or Shiffrin and Schneider. I don't know why they both are listed twice. Sometimes we're capable of doing two well-learned activities at once, such as driving an automobile along a familiar route while conversing with a passenger. If, however, a car swerves in front of us or a small child runs into the street ahead, the quality of our conversation is likely to take a sudden downturn. Likewise, when our attention is directed more toward an ongoing conversation than the simultaneous task of driving, then it is the quality of our driving that is likely to suffer. This is one reason that many governments around the world are restricting the use of mobile phones by car drivers. Some research has indicated that talking on a phone while driving increases the risk of accidents to about the same extent as alcohol intoxication, a fourfold increase by Redelmeyer and Tibshirani. Also, Strayer, Drews, and Johnson. And there's no safety advantage in limiting use to hands-free telephones, which is Strayer and Johnson. No safety advantage in limiting to using hands-free telephones. Oh, okay. Meaning it's still a distraction even when you're using hands-free versions. Okay, anything that requires our full attention literally leaves no capacity for doing much of anything else at the same time. Yeah, that tracks. Okay, so attention is a process that selects information from the environment and from memory environment, and for memory for entry into limited capacity conscious awareness. Research has indicated that using a mobile phone while driving increases the risks of accidents to nearly the same extent as alcoholic intoxication. 5.2, attention and consciousness. Attention acts as a gatekeeper to determine the contents of consciousness. Our conscious processes are limited. Who can listen to a lecture and read an email from a friend at the same time? Not me. So attention works to keep us focused on the task at hand while preventing unwanted thoughts and perceptions from interrupting us. Attention deficit disorders in children and adults, as well as the inhibition deficit hypothesis of normal aging. Wait a second, that was on the test. But that was not even supposed to be chapter 5 yet. That's frustrating. The inhibition deficit hypothesis of normal aging, which is Hasher and Zaks, indicate that we all have problems to varying degrees in attempting to maintain the focus of attention in the face of numerous distractions. That is so frustrating. Hasher and Zaks. In a case on reading taught by one of the authors, Juola, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Undergraduates sometimes report that they have read a page or more of a book before noticing that the mind had wandered onto other topics, yet their eyes had methodically continued to plow through the text. Again, which is why I read out loud, because I can't. It still happens when I'm reading out loud. Unwanted thoughts, as well as annoying environmental stimuli, can be sources of distraction when we are trying to maintain the focus of attention on the task at hand. James's definition, I'm assuming William James, of attention was based on an introspective appeal, everyone knows, that rang as true to laypersons of his day as it does to most contemporary researchers in cognition. Attention determines our conscious experiences and recollections. Yet, we do not seem able to agree on a definition of consciousness. Excuse me. We can talk freely about consciousness that can be raised, lost, or come to again, but precise definitions escape us, as do related issues of whether animals are conscious or whether computers will ever develop consciousness. What? That's ridiculous. Of course she's conscious. She knows what's going on. We will address such issues later in chapter 12, when we will consider how philosophers have viewed consciousness as aided by research in biology, psychology, and artificial intelligence. For now, let's equate consciousness with most of what goes on in working short-term memory. It wants us to go all the way back to discussion 1.3, a general theory of human memory in chapter 1, and also chapter 6. But I'm not going to do that, as we attempt to remain focused on current important tasks. For now, let's equate consciousness with most of what goes on in working short-term memory as we attempt to remain focused on current important tasks. As the capacity of working memory is limited, attention serves many roles in maintaining focus and determining what is important enough to override the current contents of memory with new information. Broadbent, who I think is a name because it says 1958, Broadbent described how attention controls working memory contents in his classic filter theory of attention. He argued that since the environment is filled with many sources of information that cannot possibly be encoded fully, we need some kind of mechanism to sort things out. For Broadbent, attention to him acted like a filter or gate that could be set at will to allow some information source to feed directly into working memory, whereas non-selected sources would literally be filtered out and the information lost and gone forever. Let's read that again. Broadbent, in his filter theory of attention, argued that since the environment is filled with many sources of information that cannot possibly be encoded fully, we need some kind of mechanism to sort things out. For Broadbent, attention to him acted like a filter or a gate that could be set at will to allow some information source to feed directly into working memory, whereas non-selected sources would be literally filtered out and the information lost and gone forever. Like that sentence until I read it the second time. That is, attention is presumably necessary for learning new information, and inattention in class or while watching a demonstration can produce poor retention, as we all know very well. When was this written? You should see my class because I am the only one who ever has, 2022. So pandemic. I'm the only one who ever has my camera on. So, and that's not to judge everybody else. That's to hold myself accountable for not doing other things while in class so that I will pay attention because I don't want to look like I'm doing other things. And I have a sneaking suspicion that other people in the class are doing other things because whenever he calls on them, they don't answer. So attention is presumably necessary for learning new information, and inattention in class or while watching a demonstration can produce poor retention, as we all know very well. Much of Broadbent's theory was based on the results of selective listening experiments. Yeah, I believe that. But the theory can easily be generalized to other sensory modalities. To begin, let's focus on visual attention and review how it was first studied empirically. Yeah, so selective listening. My mom used to talk about that all the time because my sister and I would not be paying attention, or we would like only hear some of it. Excuse me. Ooh, I'm bubbly today. Okay, reading the little bits on the side. Inhibition deficit hypothesis, which was Hasher and Zaks, a theory of cognitive aging proposed by Hasher and Zaks that attributes one of the difficulties that older persons have with the inability to ignore irrelevant information, such as in trying to follow a specific conversation at a noisy party. Oh, the inability to ignore irrelevant information. Does that mean I'm just getting older? Because I have a really hard time with that. It's not that I can't hear people, it's that I have focus issues on who's talking because like there's music and there's people talking and there's people talking and there's a dog and there's a cat and there's birds. I thought I was just ADHD. Maybe I'm not. Okay, then there's consciousness, which is the subjective feeling that we have an inner self that experiences the physical world, recalls past experiences, and acts as an agent in making decisions and carrying them out. Yeah, okay. Filter theory of attention, which is Broadbent. Broadbent's theory that there is an early filter placed between most sensory channels and perceptual awareness, such that typically only one information source at a time is selected for entry into conscious awareness and working memory, contrasted with late filter theories that allow selection after information has been channeled to long-term memory for identification. I doubt that's how my brain works. I'm pretty sure it either gets put into a working memory or is lost forever. Okay, figure 5.1 is a schematization of Broadbent's early filter theory of attention. The sensory systems, let's see if we can show you so you can see it. The sensory systems feed information into a short-term sensory store, for example, iconic memory for vision, that briefly holds information, while an adjustable filter selects a single message for entry into a limited capacity perceptual or working memory system. The outputs from the perceptual system adjust readouts from the sensory stores or selective attention, consult memory for past conditional probabilities, for example, environmental correlations, and determine the eventual responses made by the effectors. The filter theory is known as one of the first information processing theories in psychology. Okay, it's one of the first information processing theories in psychology. Broadbent's filter theory of attention. That's definitely going to be on a test. Okay, for discussion 5.1, the cocktail party phenomenon. You have surely experienced the problem of trying to carry on a conversation in a noisy environment. The noise can be due to traffic, a rock concert, a sporting event, or even several people who are talking at once. The latter situation was chosen as the paradigm case for a large body of research on a topic known as the cocktail party phenomenon. The results led to the first theories of how we use attention to filter unwanted information from impinging on conscious awareness. At a party, there are typically many people speaking simultaneously, and you might attempt to follow to join in one of these conversations to the attempted exclusion of others. Oh. With attention, this can be done, but it's sometimes difficult. Difficulties arise in situations in which you might be trapped with a bore while you notice that a much more attractive and interesting person has entered the room. In other cases, the conversation away from the one to which you are supposed to be attending becomes suddenly salient, for example, if you hear your own name mentioned behind you. The cocktail party was simulated in simplified laboratory situations in which stereo speakers or headphones were used to present two different spoken messages simultaneously. The participant was instructed to attend to one of the messages and warned that memory for the attended message would be tested later. To ensure that participants were indeed attending to one of the messages throughout, one of the messages was to be shadowed, that is, reported back aloud as it was heard. Results from experiments by Broadbent and Cherry, another person, I guess, showed that people were able to shadow one message and repeat it back fairly accurately while ignoring the other message. The more surprising result, however, was the almost complete lack of memory or even awareness of the non-shadowed message. Almost nothing could be recalled from the unattended message, and people did not even notice if the non-shadowed message was changed to a different language or replaced by backward speech. Wow. These results formed the basis of Broadbent's early filter model of attention. The term early is the idea that unattended messages, oh, okay, early filter. I thought it was early, like he had more filter theories later. So the whole thing is called early filter theory of attention. Okay. The term early is the idea that unattended messages are filtered out before they can activate memory representations to produce recognized words in conscious awareness. The early filter theory was soon challenged by other theories that acknowledged our abilities to encode many different familiar items in the external world to the level of recognition. Then, a late filter would select those items relevant for the ongoing task, resulting in decay or active suppression of unwanted, irrelevant codes in memory. Late selection models by Dutch and Dutch, or Deutsch and Deutsch, and Norman, are based on the assumption that familiar stimuli, like spoken or written words and common objects, are encoded automatically, so it does not matter if we are attending to them or not. Oh, interesting. Okay. The role of attention in late selection models is to challenge the most important and relevant meanings of items into working memory so that we can maintain focus on a single task. My head hurts so much. Okay. Some ingenious experiments by Anne Treisman offered proof, Anne Treisman offered proof that early selection is incomplete as a theory of human attention. Rather, she argued that if early filter exists, it operates only to attenuate responses to some stimuli while emphasizing the encoding of others. Okay, yeah. Then, important or relevant information always has an opportunity to get through the filter, even if it comes from a non-attended channel. Important or relevant information always has an opportunity to get through the filter, even if it comes from a non-attended channel. She demonstrated the effects of relevance by switching the two messages in midstream between the attended and unattended channels. Participants in her research often followed the message rather than the channel being coming from two different speakers. thus indicating a level of control based on meaning, a late filter effect, rather than on the physical feature of location, which would be early filter. Treisman also showed that if the same message was presented in both channels, I gotta highlight that actually. Participants in her research often followed the message rather than the channel, thus indicating a level of control based on meaning, which is a late filter effect, rather than on the physical feature of location, which is early filter. Treisman also showed that if the same message was presented in both channels, but was out of sync by several seconds, listeners did not notice that they were the same. However, if the relative speeds of the two tapes were changed so that the two messages gradually caught up with one another, listeners would eventually notice that the same message was being presented to the two ears. She also found an interesting asymmetry of some theoretical importance. If the unattended message was leading, the two messages had to be played within about 1.5 seconds of each other before the identity was noticed. I have no idea what that sentence just said. However, if the attended message was leading, a lag of as much as 4.5 seconds could pass, yet listeners still noticed the identity. I don't know what identity means in this case, or what leading means in this case. This asymmetry points out one fact of early versus late or deep processing. Stimulus inputs that are ignored may be processed to the level of meaning, but they remain in memory for only a second or two before they are lost and forgotten. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. This asymmetry points out one fact of early versus late processing. Stimulus inputs that are ignored may be processed to the level of meaning, but they remain in memory for only a second or two before they are lost and forgotten. With attention, however, inputs are processed to a deeper level and remain inactive. In active working memory for at least 4.5 seconds on average in the shadowing task, and even longer in a more permanent memory system as demonstrated by later tests for recall of the contents of the shadowed message. So uncomfortable right now. This isn't even cold anymore. Early and late selection models. The upper figure, which is the sensory inputs, I'll show you in a bit. No, I'm not going to show you. Sorry, you don't have to buy that book. Upper figure demonstrates the early selection theories of Broadbent and Treisman. The dotted lines represent information attenuation suggested by Treisman. The lower figure demonstrates the late selection theories of Deutsch and Norman. Okay, so we've got early selection is sensory inputs into the sensory analysis. The lower figure, blah, blah, blah. What are the dotted lines represent information attenuation suggested by Treisman? I don't see a difference in these, but okay. In summary, we have evolved with an attentional system that serves two purposes. First, there is a deliberate attempt to seek out what is important for the task at hand and to maintain focus on this information while attempting to attenuate irrelevant information. At the same time, there's a tendency for information to impinge on conscious awareness if it is related to the current task or if it is potentially important to our survival. For example, a sudden sound or appearance of a new object. So the two purposes: deliberate attempt to seek out what is important, and a tendency for information to impinge on conscious awarenesses if it is related to the current task. Liz, huh? That would be the second. 5.3, visual attention. Most often we can freely attend to any part of the visual environment, and this freedom can lead to the illusion that everything is visible and perceptible at once. For example, that we have a photographic record of the visual scene. I don't know what visual scene means. What does that mean? To attend this freedom can... This phenomenon has been called the grand illusion of complete perception. Grand illusion of complete perception by Enns, E-N-N-S. It is merely an illusion, and it is clearly false. People can and do miss things that are quite obviously present, most commonly because our eyes record more information than we can attend to or report. Change blindness. Oh, this was in the lecture. Okay. Change blindness, Rensink, Simons, and Levin, and inattentional blindness, Mack and Rock. Change blindness, inattentional blindness. Mack and Rock. Rensink. Change blindness and inattentional blindness are two well-known phenomena showing how people can completely miss an otherwise easily detectable target if their attention is focused elsewhere. This classic change blindness paradigm involves viewing a sequence of pictures in which one scene is alternating with another in rapid succession, and there is one obvious difference between them. For example, the presence or absence of a tree in the background. Observers often take several seconds or even minutes to detect the difference, even though it is obvious once they notice it. It appears that, contrary to the grand illusion, most of the visual scene is represented in a sketchy gist form, and details are available for only a small area on which attention is focused. An example of change blindness. The two photographs of the pyramids represents successive shots in a film used in a change blindness experiment. Typically, the two scenes are alternated with a short blank or mask between them. Most such changes go unnoticed by observers unless they are specifically attending to them when the change occurs. So I looked for it. Oh, it's right there. It's this like random rock that's not there in the second one. This one is not there. But I was looking for it. If in the inattention blindness demonstration, subjects are given a difficult perceptual task, such as a brief presentation of two lines that cross in the center of the display, and they have to judge which is longer, the horizontal line or the vertical one. On one of the trials, a geometric form is presented along with the lines, and the subjects are asked afterwards if they could identify it. In fact, most subjects are surprised that there was anything other than the lines presented at all. The conclusion is that we have the illusion of complete perception of a complex stimulus only because we can use our attention to select any component of the visual or auditory scene and experience it at an arbitrary level of detail. So my question would be, for people who have photographic memories, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but my guess would be that it is not like in the movies. They cannot simply recall a scene. Like if I look right here and that's it, I cannot recall it on my own and be like, oh yeah, the dishes were over there. There are 4 bowls on the counter. There's a crate for a dog to the far right, and it has a blah 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 blah. Like right now I'm using working memory. But how does that work? How does photographic memory actually work? Oh no. Did I move stuff? Oh, I had changed the page. In this way, the stimulus functions as a backup memory from which we can select and direct our conscious awareness to any of a number of specific components. See O'Regan and N and O umlaut E. Another famous example of inattentional blindness was provided by Simmons and Chabris. They had subjects watch a video clip of two teams of players passing a basketball back and forth, one ball for a team dressed in black uniforms and another for a team dressed in white. The task was to count the number of successful passes completed by either the white team or the black team for different subjects. This task was completed enough that the observer's attention was completely taken up by counting one set of passes while filtering out the others. The filter worked so well that most people did not notice that during the video, a person dressed in a gorilla suit walked through the middle of the players involved in the passing of the game. Most subjects were astonished afterwards to be informed of this fact and could hardly believe that they could have missed it when they viewed the same film a second time and were asked to look for the gorilla. Example of the inattentional blindness paradigm used by Mack and Rock. Several trials of the main task, judging which of two crossing lines is longer, had a single frame embedded in a series with an unexpected geometric form, including in the periphery. Subjects performed poorly on a detailed form memory test, indicating a lack of stimulus recognition without attention. To test the grand illusion of complete perception idea, an important question to ask is, how much information is recognizable in a single key fixation? Cattell is the one who asked that. Eye fixations occur at a more or less regular pace of 2 to 5 per second, interspersed between eye movements called saccades. I think that's how he said it. But shorter and longer ones can be present in any task. Information presented clearly for about 200 milliseconds is presumed to represent what is visible in a single eye fixation. Of course, in the real world, our fixations follow a path determined by internal goals or strategies, as well as by salient external events. Shoot. There we go. Our perceptions are built up cumulatively over a succession of fixations to generate an internal 3D model of the environment. Nevertheless, as we look closely at each successive step in an old building while walking up a dimly lit, I'm so tired. Nevertheless, as we look closely at each successive step in an old building while walking up a dimly lit staircase, our eyes can dart to the location of a sudden movement in a corner. It's like I always find bugs or things moving in the dark. I just assumed it was my focus issues and post-traumatic stress from having bugs walk on me. We can also trace a regular pattern of fixation separated by rapid saccadic eye movements in certain tasks like scanning an instrument panel or reading a paragraph. That's actually helpful because saccadic now sounds like some kind of bug, and that'll help me remember that when we look at each successive step in an old building while walking up a dimly lit staircase, our eyes can dart to the location of a sudden movement in a corner of a bug or something. Okay, for discussion, 5.2, measuring the duration of a visual image. Many experiments have been devised to answer the question, how much can we see in a single eye fixation? This question was addressed in Wundt's lab by James McKean-Cattle and also by Raymond Dodge and Benno Erdmann in Germany more than 100 years ago. See Huey for a thoughtful review of early research on word perception and reading. They used various types of apparatus to present words or letters very briefly that then were to be reported. The general conclusion was that the amount reported depended on the meaning and the familiarity of the material. The general conclusion was the amount reported, the amount of what? They used various types of apparatus to present words or letters very briefly that then were to be reported. So words or letters. Okay, the general conclusion was that the amount of words or letters reported depended on the meaning and familiarity of the material. That makes sense. For unrelated consonants, however, only 4 or 5 items could reliably be reported, even if there were many more letters in the display. Stop licking your feet. Stop licking your feet. From the behaviorist tradition, the number of letters reported should be taken as the number seen, since a correct report is a reliable behavioral response. Yet almost everyone who has ever participated in these types of experiments has complained that many letters can actually be seen, but they gradually fade away before they can be reported. What can an experimental psychologist do if observers' introspective reports disagree with the data that are collected? What was done for almost a century was to ignore the subjective reports and record the actual data. The number of letters correctly reported after a single brief exposure of a multi-letter display was taken as a measure of what was actually seen. Well, that's dumb. In 1960, George Sperling published the results from his doctoral dissertation in a paper that became one of the hallmarks of the cognitive revolution. Well, that's got to be highlighted. George Sperling, Cognitive Revolution. He took his observers' introspections to heart and tried to invent a way to measure how much information was actually available immediately after a brief visual display. He hit on the clever idea that rather than asking his participants to record all the letters in the display, the whole report task, he would only ask for part of the display to be reported, partial report task. The trick was that the observers knew which part was to be reported, never knew which part. The trick was that the observers never knew which part was to be reported until after the display was turned off. Sperling used displays of unrelated consonants in rows and columns centered on the display. For example, the display could include 4 consonants in each of 3 rows. Sperling used a tone, sounded shortly after the display ended, to cue the observers which row to report. A high tone indicated the top row, a medium pitch indicated the middle row, and a low tone indicated the bottom row. Gosh, I hope they're not tone deaf, because that would be hard for people. He found that people could accurately report letters from the cue row if the tone was presented within a fraction of a second after the display was shut off. However, if the tone was delayed further, observers could only guess from the 4 or 5 letters that they could remember in short-term memory, the whole report level. That is, the partial report technique showed an advantage over whole report that was statistically significant for cue delays up to almost a half second after the display was physically gone. Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. This is Sperling's experiment. The procedures used in Sperling's 1960 experiment, this guy. In the whole report task, subjects report as many letters as possible from a brief 50 milliseconds display. About 4.5 is the average number. B, if a cue is given to report the top, middle, or bottom row, performance is almost perfect, 4 out of 4. If the tone occurs as soon as the display is offset. If the tone is delayed for as little as half a second, however, performance drops precipitously, which means a lot. Interesting. But why do they have to use that face? The important deduction that Sperling made was that since his subjects could report 3 to 4 letters from the single cued row without knowing which row was to be cued, then they must have had 3 or 4 letters available for a brief time from each of the rows. This very short-term visual memory came to be called ionic memory to indicate its sensory nature. Ionic memory. Oh, sorry, iconic. Iconic. Iconic memory. The icon is a very brief image of a display that persists for some time in sensory memory after the display is gone. The iconic image can be scanned with attention, much like a physical display can be scanned with eye movements, but its duration is very brief. Once the icon is gone, and Sperling found that little useful information persisted beyond about 300 milliseconds in most conditions, only those letters that remain have been coded in a more durable form, such as letter names in verbal short-term memory. Partial report advantage over whole report. It's obvious. Partial report shows an advantage over whole report, while a sensory or iconic image remains for a fraction of a second after the stimulus is turned off. Wait, so we're saying iconic is the good one, or the very short-term memory, visual memory came to be called iconic memory to indicate its sensory nature. The icon is a brief image of a display that persists for some time in memory, in sensory memory after the display is gone. The iconic image can be scanned with attention, much like a physical display can be scanned with eye movements. Yeah, I sometimes if I'm trying to memorize this, I have a picture in my head really quickly and I can say what it was, but now it's gone. But I have to focus on it. I have to know I'm doing it. Okay. The importance of Sperling's research rests on its demonstration that although introspections might be unreliable, they nonetheless can be sources of theories to be tested in the laboratory. In this case, people's introspections are correct. A brief visual display is stretched out in time by persisting sensory activity, and as long as it lasts, the sensory image can be looked at by the mind's eye in much the same way that we examine a concrete image with eye movements. Since the time of Sperling's research, it has been shown that other sensory modalities such as hearing and touch also have brief memories. Really? Sensory memories serve the likely function of lengthening the time that sensory information is available so that we can attend to selected parts and code them into a more permanent form for later use. The image of a tiger illuminated by a flash of lightning or the flickering light of a campfire would be useless if it could not be retained long enough for us to figure out what it is. Similarly, speech sounds cannot be recognized as words or sentences unless we have some type of memory available to integrate them over time. The first operation performed on selected sensory information, is to try to match or categorize it with respect to known information in memory. I think that is top down. We call this categorization process perception, and it is the topic of chapter 3, which we already read. This is chapter 5. I just want to sleep. You with me still? Still with me, guys? The classic experiment that showed beyond any doubt that people could see more than they can report, even if they cannot see everything clearly, was Sperling's study of partial report. In such controlled environments, the effects of attention on what we see and what we are able to report can be cleanly measured. Attention can be focused on some aspects of a visual display, and the region attended will result in better performance for recognizing objects in that region. Although we usually fixate or look directly at the current object of our attention, much research has shown that attention serves a role in deciding where to fixate next. That is, attention operates covertly without any outward signs in determining what object or area in the visual field is worthy of more detailed inspection. The selected location then becomes a target for the next overt eye movement. An advantage for information processing. Sorry, I was thinking about the test. Let's read that sentence again. The selected location. Location of what? Worthy or detailed. The selected location then becomes a target for the next overt eye movement. An advantage for information processing in the attended region is often profited at a loss for non-attended regions of the field. Thus, in agreement with Broadbent's theory, Posner argued that attention's most important role, Posner, must be the selection of what information should be directed to conscious working memory, where it can be encoded more deeply for recognition and response decisions. This selection results in improved detection and recognition even before the eyes start to move, and even if the item of interest disappears before the eyes can fixate on it. Besides selection, attention serves as a monitor of conscious processing, always at the alert to detect new or important information. There is nothing so powerful in attracting one's attention as a sudden, unexpected sound or the sudden appearance of a new object in the field of view. Janides and Yantis. Okay. Other unattended stimuli that have high personal salience, such as one's name, frequently result in a change of attention, even in defiance of one's current focus. More. Such selection is limited, however, by the ongoing processing capacity of short-term working memory. Oh my gosh. I have 30 pages? Wait, so that was 50 pages? Oh my gosh. I just went through 10 pages. And I have 30 pages left. For discussion 5.3, the spotlight model of attention. Helmholtz was among the first to speculate that attention and the direction of one's gaze are not necessarily correlated. That makes sense, because if I'm looking over here, but I'm listening to over here, those are not correlated. He claimed that if he entered his office in the dark and looked straight ahead, he could prepare himself to attend either to the left or right of his point of fixation. To prove this fact to himself, he then briefly lit his office with an electrical spark and satisfied himself by being able to name more objects visible to the left or right of fixation, in the direction he had been attending. It was as if attention functions like a functional fovea to temporarily emulate the physiological fovea in the center back part of the eye onto which things that we are looking at directly are imaged. Excuse me. Although the foveated object normally is represented in greater detail in the brain than in a peripheral object, attention can function to override this predominance such that items presented to the fovea are sometimes seen less well than objects presented to attended peripheral locations. Juola, Bauhuis, Cooper, and Werner. The first empirical work to study Helmholtz's claim in controlled situations was designed by Posner and his colleagues, Snyder and Davidson. They defined two areas to the left and right of a fixation point where a single target could appear. The defined areas were marked by boxes, and the target was a small X that could appear in one of the boxes. The task was to hit a response button as quickly as possible when the X appeared, a simple response time task. On some trials, one of the boxes brightened briefly before the target was presented, indicated in red in figure 5.7. There you go. This was a cue that the target was likely to occur within that box, although the cue was not function to Although the cue was not functioned to override this predominance. Functioned? Such that items presented to the fovea are sometimes seen less well than objects presented to attended peripheral locations. The first empirical work to study Helmholtz's claim in controlled situations was designed by Posner and his colleagues. Did they just? Oh my gosh, they just copy and pasted. They define two areas to the left and right. This whole paragraph is there's two paragraphs. It's duplicated. Okay. This was a cue that such that target was likely to occur within that box, although the cue was not Oh, yeah. Yeah, it starts right here. Function to override. This whole thing was duplicated. That whole paragraph and this bit of the paragraph was duplicated on accident. Someone messed up. Well, okay. Wow. Maybe that's why it's 30 pages more, because somebody accidentally like copied, like duplicated 5 pages and like 20 times. On some trials, one of the boxes brightened briefly before the target was presented, indicated in this thing, 3 kinds of trials. This was a cue that the target was likely to occur within that box, although the cue was not 100% valid. Posner and colleagues found that if the target subsequently appeared within the cued box, response times were shorter than if the square appeared in a non-cued box, an invalid cue. The response times on no cue trials were in between the responses for valid and invalid cue trials. Task: hit a left-hand key if the target X appears on the left side, and the right-hand key if it appears on the right side. I see. Well, that seems pretty valid to me. An important point to keep in mind, whoa, is that the entire time for cue presentation followed by target onset, and then the target offset was kept below 200 milliseconds, so the observers did not have time to move their eyes before the cue and display were shown and disappeared. Nonetheless, people's behavior indicated that something moved in the direction of the cue. Posner asserted that this something was attention and that it moves like a spotlight moves across the stage to illuminate part of the visual field while leaving other parts in comparative darkness. If a target is presented within the spotlight of attention, it is dedicated and responded to quickly. If, however, the target is presented elsewhere, the spotlight usually has to be redirected to the target location, which takes time and slows responses. On no cue trials, there is no spotlight as observers attempt to spread their attention in a diffuse way over. On no cue trials, there is no spotlight as observers attempt to spread their attention in a diffuse way over the entire display in preparation for a target that could occur anywhere. Later research has shown that the spotlight metaphor, while useful, does not capture the full flexibility of how we distribute attention over the visual field. Depending on display characteristics and task demands, attention can be distributed more or less evenly over the field, concentrated around central vision, for example, the fovea, concentrated at some location or over some object in space, or even distributed over rings around the fixation point or in different locations at the same time. Such a high degree of flexibility emphasizes 2 important characteristics of visual attention. First, attentional systems have evolved to enable us to attend to a variety of different objects and events that are important for our survival. Second, what we see and respond to is determined not only by what is present in the visual world, but also by what we're expecting and are determined to find. Theories of visual attention. 5.4a, exogenous versus endogenous attention. Posner differentiated by what he called exogenous. Posner, endogenous. Exogenous, which is environmentally generated or bottom up, and endogenous, which is self-generated or top down, controls of attention. Exogenous controls, which is bottom up, exogenous controls are mediated by lower brain systems such as the colliculi in the midbrain, and they can result in rapid and automatic orienting of attention to an exogenous cue. Stimuli that most clearly attracts attention automatically are sudden sounds or the appearances of new objects in the visual field. Stimuli that most clearly attract attention automatically are sudden sounds or the appearance of new objects in the visual field. These primitive orienting responses have evolved early in animals since being aware of new objects is an important determinant of survival. In fact, the superior colliculi of animals such as fish and frogs are the main processors of visual stimuli in their central nervous system. It has been said that a frog will starve to death in a cage filled with dead flies because they are literally not visible as food. Oh, this is like the koala thing. Koalas don't recognize leaves unless they're on branches, and so they will literally starve if there aren't, like, if they're given a bowl of leaves because they don't recognize it as food. Koala. Maybe I'll use that for my science daily. Similarly, characters in the movie Jurassic Park were warned to remain still so that they would not be spotted by the Tyrannosaurus Rex. In mammals and especially primates, these primitive brainstem systems remain functional, but they are largely augmented, especially in conscious awareness, by visual centers in the cerebral cortex. Now, the problem with that is that Tyrannosaurus Rex could probably smell them. Endogenous, top down, endogenous controls of attention include deliberate searching for specific items, such as looking for a pair of red socks in a drawer full of multicolored stockings and other articles. Stimuli, let's do that. Beautiful. Stimuli with features that match what we are looking for attract attention, but in a slower and less certain way than do exogenous cues. Journalize. This difference is primarily due to the fact that exogenous cues trigger responses in a reflexive bottom-up way under direction from automatic hardwired systems in the brainstem. Endogenous responses, on the other hand, are determined by search strategies under top-down control of executive systems and the frontal eye fields in the frontal lobes of the brain that direct the actions of lower visual systems. So again, exogenous attention is the bottom-up automatic attraction of attention to a salient aspect of the environment, most certainly to a sudden sound or the sudden appearance of a new object. Endogenous attention is the top-down voluntary direction of attention toward information that is likely to be related to one's goals or needs. I can't believe it's only been 2 pages. When did I start? This has probably been like an hour already. I don't know how to tell. I don't know when I started. Holy moly. Holy Toledo. So 13 pages in like an hour. Oh. When does it end? When can I go home? Okay, let's get up. Wow. Whoa. Hello. These are the things I could do without. Come on. He's talking like you. Come on. Ah. Readjusting. Where do you want to be? Well, there's not really any part in my house that is clean. So you're gonna get a bad view no matter what we do. Oh, I've got stuff all over me. Okay. ¿Listos? Comienzan. Treisman's figure integration theory, or FIT. It's not really enough light. There we go. Can you see it okay? This is called propping, by the way. In chronic pain management, when you prop a body part up so that you're not like overusing those muscles, that is called propping. Make sure I have my markers. Make sure you don't fall asleep while studying. It's really hot today. I have my AC on. It doesn't actually reach anywhere. I don't have a fan. Oh my gosh, is the fan not on? The fan's not on this whole time. One moment, please. Ugh, so many pillows. Oh, it's just not on oscillate. There we go. Gotta get a new ice pack too. New ice pack. That is what you are in my head. Why is my dog barking outside? What is she barking at? No, that's not good. Something's wrong with my freezer. It's not getting cold. It's at 30 degrees. Your freezer's supposed to be at like -20. Oh, I hope none of you have migraines. It's pretty awful. Okay, let's get this short. Whoa. I'm closer. No, I'm closer. Too close. Do you remember that from Aladdin? Cartoon version. Aladdin. Sweet. Okay. I should have started reading this like 5 days ago. Oh. Many theorists have expanded on the argument that attention operates at different levels in the cognitive system. For example, Treisman and Galade developed Neisser's argument that attention follows two successive stages in selecting items to be examined closely. Yeah, I'm bubbly today. Excuse me. Argument that attention follows two successive stages in selecting items to be examined closely. The first stage is pre-attentive stage, in which a broad swath of the environment is processed in parallel. Most features in the field of view, including such things as color, orientation, size, depth, and motion, are coded by separate modules into feature maps that represent those specific aspects of the visual stimuli. In addition, there is a master map of locations to which all of the individual feature maps can be related. This relation, however, is achieved only in the second stage, called focal attention. Don't ask me why pre-attention stage is highlighted, but focal attention is not. I guess only one stage is important. But the pre-attention stage in Treisman's feature integration theory, or FIT, essentially is the information available in sensory or iconic memory. Features are briefly available in different modules or feature maps of the environment that are registered and maintained in parallel. Treisman and Gormican. What? Oh, okay. Treisman didn't do it alone. It was Treisman and Gormican. Their feature integration theory, or FIT, of attention. All features in the visual field. There's another picture. Come closer. I don't know how I'm going to do this. Come closer. Now I can't read it because I'm too. I don't even know if you can read this. Okay. All features in the visual field are registered in parallel in separate maps for color, orientation, motion, size, and other fundamental features. A master map of locations can be scanned with an attentional spotlight. Wherever attention is focused on the location map, features in the other modules at that location are bound together in an object file. In other words, attention acts like a glue that binds features in a recognizable object. Object file, red horizontal line, lower left. Color map, screen red. Diagonal, horizontal, vertical. Okay, sure. Sure, okay, whatever. In Treisman's theory, focal attention is limited to a succession of small areas in the visual field, much as a spotlight is moved around a large stage to illuminate specific settings. What are you doing? Bridget? What do you have? Why are you choking? Come here. Up, up. You okay? What did you eat? You okay? What's going on, huh? Let's get those eye goobers. No, Mom, don't touch me. I'll get it later. Go get some water. Go get some water. Okay. Kids, right? In Treisman's theory, focal attention is limited to a succession of small areas in the visual field, much as the spotlight is moved around a large stage to illuminate specific settings. When the spotlight of attention falls on a particular location, all features represented in the pre-attentive stage are integrated into a single object-level representation. For this reason, Treisman's theory is called the feature integration theory of attention. It is as though specific features are free-floating in a pre-attentive field, and attention acts as the glue that binds them into recognizable objects. Objects usually can be recognized only one at a time, however, making the second focal stage of attention a serial process, unlike the parallel feature processing that occurs in the earlier pre-attentive stage. Am I at least halfway done? Okay, I started at 119. I have to go to 160, I think I said. 161. 161 minus 119. That's 42 pages. Ferk. So 21 pages would be halfway there. So that would be 140. When I get to 140, I'm halfway done. And I can take a break. Mark it with an X. That's when I get there, I'm taking a break. Oh no, I'm gonna stop and like maybe take a nap. Or maybe just read fun things. But I digress. Let's go. Hop into it. Ugh. A comparison of fast feature-based pop-out search and slower conjunction search. Oh, fast feature-based search and slower conjunction search. This is a search for a target that differs from the distractors of a single feature orientation left panel. What? Versus a search for a target that differs from the distractors by a conjunction of features, how vertical and horizontal components are combined. Idealized search time data are shown in the lower panels for each type of search. In feature search, neither positive target present nor negative target absent search times depend on the number of items. The target appears to pop out from the distractors. Excuse me. In conjunction search, however, the search appears to be serial rather than parallel. Serial as in a series, not as in Kellogg's Corn Flakes. And it terminates with finding a target if it is present. Thus, on average, the positive search times are about half as long as the negative ones, since all items must be searched on target absent trials. Oh, I see. Because once you find it, you don't have to keep going. But if you're looking for something that's not there, you have to go through the whole thing. It's called brute force. Okay. Treisman and Gallade. Based their theory on two related findings from studies of visual search. First, it is well known that search is fast and easy for a target that differs from all other items in the visual field by a single feature. Right, so if we're looking for, here's a good example. There's a whole page of letters, right? And if the difference is size, or let's say bold, that you're going to find that bold stuff a lot faster than not being able to find what you're looking for if it wasn't bold. That's one example. So it is well known that search is fast and easy for a target that differs from all other items in the visual field by a single feature. Try the tasks shown in 5.9 to see that finding the target T among letters with curved features and no horizontal elements is quite easy. However, finding an L among the letters with horizontal and vertical features is not so easy. I found it really quickly, but I'm really good at that stuff. Treisman and her colleagues argued that if the target differs from background distractor items by a single salient feature, then search should be parallel, all items examined at once, based on information obtainable preattentively. That is, a single red X will pop out from the field of blue X's when one is looking for a red item, and it will be just as easy to decide that there is no target when there are only blue items in the display. However, if the target is defined by a unique combination of features such as a red X among blue X's and red N's, the search is more difficult, since the target features exist by themselves in other display items. The target can be found only if the focal stage of attention. In other words, if the target is defined by features that have to be conjoined by focal attention in order to integrate all its components, then search proceeds serially, one at a time, in a series, until the target is found or until all items have been examined without finding a target. Treisman and Gallade proposed a simple test to determine whether a target can be found at the pre-attentive level or only at the later focal attentive stages of processing. The test is based on an examination of a plot of response times, RTs, in search tasks against the number of items in the display. In these search tasks, the target is present either once or not at all, so the person's task is to respond positively as soon as the target is found, and to respond negatively when the search is completed without finding the target. The results are generally straightforward. If the target is defined by a single unique feature, such as color, motion, orientation, that differs from all the other items in a scene, which is feature search, you're looking for a single feature changed. Search times are independent of the number of displayed items. The response time by display size, response time by set size, functions are flat. If, however, finding the target is possible only after focal attention has integrated the display item's features, such as finding the one red horizontal line among blue horizontal and red verticals, which is conjunction search. So there's a lot of like the same type of thing, and you're looking for one that's very similar to all the other ones already, then the slope of the response time by set size function is greater than 0. In some search tasks, especially those with more than about 5 items in the display, it seems as if we quit as soon as the target item is found, and the slope is about twice as large on negative, with no target trials, as on trials containing the target. This result is expected since if the display items are searched serially, the search should terminate as soon as the target is found, which would be on average about halfway through the search. On no target trials, however, the search would have to cover all the display items until a negative response could be made. So, for example, doing a crossword puzzle, like a traditional crossword puzzle, where there's a crap ton of letters and you have to find certain words made up by the letters in a serial in a line. It's harder. So once you find the words that you're looking for, you can stop. But then with spangrams, with the New York Times, so you've got like, where's my phone? One moment, please. Where are you? Uh-huh. Oh. So if you've got spangrams in the New York Times games, or strands rather, I guess. So with a traditional crossword puzzle, you're looking for like one word. Let's say make waves. So what is this one? Let's just say you're looking for the word doing. This isn't going to be the word they're looking for because this is not a traditional crossword's not the right word. Crossword's not the right word. I forget what these are called, but so that is a real world word. Doing is a real word. In this game, however, all of the words that you make use every single letter in this thing. So you can't, you're gonna have to use every single letter, and so it's more of a conjunction search. Can I help you? Can I help you? Thank you. Making sure I'm okay. I'm not dying. Okay, good. Okay. So that's conjunction search and feature search. A second result Treisman used to support FIT, which is the feature integration theory, was the occasional report of illusory conjunctions in a search display. That is, if a display is presented too briefly, or if an observer's attention is focused elsewhere, some display items will be processed only pre-attentively. If they do not undergo focal attentive processing, their features should be free-floating, and they should be almost as likely to combine with features from neighboring items as with features from their own item. If a person is asked to name an object from an unattended region containing red X's and blue O's, for example, the response blue X is likely to be made, even though no such stimulus was shown. Modifications of fit. Like any good theory, feature integration theory generated much research that eventually led to revisions of the theory. See the special issues of attention, perception, and psychophysics devoted to honoring Treisman's theory and its recent updates and extensions published 2 years after her death. Oh, she did. The main reasons for the revisions were the unreliability of some findings that were its main supports. That is, parallel search, as defined by a flat response time by set size function, is not limited to feature search. Some conjunctions apparently pop out as well. Nakayama and Silverman, Wolf, Cave, and Franzel. Nakayama and Silverman showed that target items differing from distractors in depth or motion could be found quickly without having to search through irrelevant items at a different depth or relative motion from the target. The crucial aspect in visual search appears to be whether or not the display can be segmented into potential targets and items that can be easily rejected. If some non-targets can be rejected as a set of having a salient feature or two that eliminates them from being possible targets, then the remaining items can be searched more efficiently. Searching through the remaining items can now be parallel if the target is defined by a single feature among these items. Egith, Virzi, and Garbart. Reading these things to remind you, feature search is the search for a target. Did you fart? My face is right here. Come on, dude. Ugh. Rude. Gross. Okay, feature search is the search for a target object that differs from the background distractors by a single salient feature. The target appears to pop out, and search time is independent of the number of distractors in the display. Conjunction search is the search for a target object that differs from the background distractors by a unique combination of features that are individually present among the distractors, and search time increases linearly with the number of distractors in the display. And illusory conjunctions, according to the feature integration theory, features that are not bound together by focal attention can be combined incorrectly, and subjects might report seeing objects that were not actually present. And to remind you of what focal theory is, or focal attention is not, that was the second stage of Treisman and Gallade and Neisser's argument that attention follows two successive stages in selecting items to be examined closely. So focal attention is the master map of locations to which all of the individual feature maps can be related. And it's the second stage. Okay. In a different rebuttal to feature integration theory, Cohen and Ivory challenged the notion that illusory conjunctions occur frequently. Again, illusory conjunctions are when you can see things that are not there because you didn't see them fast enough, and so you kind of conflate the things that you did see that were actually there. They challenged the notion that that occurs frequently. Do you see this? What a goofball. What a weirdo. Is that comfortable? What a weirdo. In a different rebuttal to, they found that subjects reported such conjunctions only rarely, and when they occurred, they usually were miscombined features from neighboring items. They claimed that the effects of attention are small at best, and the results are inconsistent with the idea that features are bound into an object only with focal attention and freely dissociated without it. Donk, poor person. Donk in 1999 has also claimed that when features are processed, they include coarse absolute location information as well as good relative location information. When feature conjunction errors are reported, they are most likely to be confusions between targets and nearby distractors in the display rather than random miscombinations of free-floating features. I mean, that's kind of what I imagined. The way I explained it was how this is, where you conflate the things that are there into something that wasn't there. And they're saying it's not like if you look at a bunch of X's and O's that you see a red box, because there's no boxes and there's no red. But X's and O's are lines and circles and stuff. And so you might see a J. That was how I interpreted it, but okay. I have not read the actual study, so. Pages. Is this a good stopping point? Are you having fun? Are you enjoying this? I don't know. There's not really any good stopping points. So I'm at 5.4D. I'm just going to stop here. because I need to read some fun stuff. Cognitive psychology. I don't want to read for me. I don't want to look at anything anymore. What do I need to do? So I have a test that's due. I have to test myself on this reading. Oh, good. Tomorrow night. Not today. So I have one more day to read it. But I also have the readings on attention and Carpenter and Schachter to read. Or Schachter. Also, I have not read any of Rama. The Phantoms in the Brain. Okay. Well, I'm gonna go read some fun stuff. Maybe take a break. Bye.